Hello, this is Kathy Lewis. Welcome to this Concur follow-up webinar. In this webinar, we will look at some topics that were developed from frequently asked questions asked from our approvers. The first thing that I'd like to cover with you is a little bit of a discussion about the difference between a default approver and a cost object approver. So keep in mind that all users in the Concur system are set up with a default entity and department. And in my case, my default entity is O2, my department is O2025. So for every entity and department, there is a designated default approver and a cost object approver. So whenever I charge to my default entity and department, my default approver is Diane Danessa, and when I submit an expense report, it will automatically flow to Diane for approval. Now, if I charge outside of O2025, it's going to go to what is called a cost object approver. So let's say, for instance, maybe Financial Information Systems and Purchasing Services is working on a joint project, and I'm doing an expense report, and the expenses are going to be shared between Purchasing Services and Financial Information Systems. So in my expense report, I am charging to both O2025 and O2070. Since I am charging to a department outside of my area, it will go to the designated cost object approver for O2070, who is Tom Youngs. So anytime a preparer of an expense report is charging to a department outside of their default department, it is going to go to a cost object approver. Now, this does come into play, the difference between default and cost object does come into play when an approver is actually taking action on an expense report, and we'll see that momentarily. Now, also, let's say within my department, we have O2 accounts and also O5 accounts, grant accounts. But since entity O2 is my default, even if I can charge to O5 accounts, since that is outside of my default entity, it might go to the same approver, but in this case, Diane is considered the cost object approver for me because this entity and department combination is outside of my default. If someone outside of our department, so let's say Tom Youngs creates an expense report, and he charges to O2025, being that this is not his default entity and department, it is going to Monty and not Diane because Monty is the cost object approver for this entity and department. So anyone who charges to this, and this is not their default combination, then it automatically goes to Monty. And again, you'll see in a few minutes where that comes into play. So I'm going to go into the application, and I am logged in as an approver, and I am going to go to Approvals. And you can see I have two expense reports awaiting my approval. So I'm going to open up the first one, and I can see the details. Now, as a approver, as a default approver, your buttons will say Send Back to User, Approve, or Approve and Forward. But when you are the cost object approver, you do not have Approve and Forward. You only have Approve. But there is a way as a cost object approver that you can use a forward function, and I'll show you that shortly. Keep in mind when you're reviewing expense reports that you can view the detail on any expenses by either hovering over icons to see attached receipts or to see comments. You can also see a summary Amount due company is the amount that was charged to a travel card, and there are no travel card charges on this expense report. And the amount due the employee, which is the same as the total report amount and total approved. Total approved is total report amount minus any personal expenses. So there are no personal expenses on this expense report. Total approved is the same as the total amount, and the total approved does reflect the amount that will be charged to your GL account. If I wanted to double check maybe how mileage was calculated, I can click on it and open it up. I can go to the mileage calculator. Maybe you want to double check whether personal mileage was deducted. If someone is traveling on a normal business day and is claiming that mileage, maybe they traveled to, in this case, Altoona, maybe they travel to the airport, etc. If they're traveling on a normal business day, they should be deducting their normal commute if they typically drive from home to the Oakland campus. In this case, they did not, otherwise this would be checked. Maybe you want to send this back to the user and ask them why they did not claim their commute or approving forward. I'm going to send this back. You have the ability to enter comments. And click OK. Now in this next expense report, notice our total amount and the requested amount is different, and also the amount due the employee is different from those two figures. And we'll see the details for each one of these. So I'm going to click on the report name. Okay, now if we look at the group business meals, notice that we see a dollar amount and we see an approved amount that is less than the amount for the group business meal. We can also see that this was charged to a travel card. We can see attached receipts. We can also see comments. When you see a greater than sign, it means that you can open this up for additional details. One of the questions that is frequently asked from both delegates and approvers is, how do you deduct personal expenses? So let's say part of this group business meal was alcohol and your traveler cannot claim alcohol. With any expense type, whether it is group business meals or hotels, it doesn't matter the actual expense type, you have the ability to itemize. And through itemization, that's how you pull out personal expenses. There's actually an expense type that says personal expense non-reimbursable. So in this case, there was an itemization done. $25 was claimed as personal. And notice for anything that's marked as personal, the approved amount is 0. So what that means is $25 will be claimed as personal. It will be deducted from the reimbursable amount, and personal expenses do not get charged to your GL account. If I click on the comments tab, I can see what this was for. I can also click on the expense type and open it up and see again the dollar amount. I can see that the group business meal portion, I can click on the comments to see that this portion is for the dinner. I can also click on it to open it up. And I can see the attendees. So again, just remember that you can use personal expense type with any expense to do a deduction through itemization. Now, if I go under details and look at totals, I can see the report total minus any personal expenses, and I'll also see the amount that was charged to the travel card and the amount due the employee. So the employee will be due the report total minus personal expenses, also minus anything that was charged to the travel card, because that is not a out-of-pocket expense. So this is where you can get the actual breakdown of your totals. If I am a cost object approver, and if I don't see approve and forward, but I do want to forward this to another approver, maybe just for their review, or you have a question about, is one of the expenses allowable, or is the account number that is charged to allowable? As a cost object approver, you can still forward, but where you're going to find that button is under details. If I go under details, remember that you can see allocations. So if you wanted to double check the account number that was charged, 100% is being charged to this account. But if I want to forward to another approver, I'm going to go back under details, and I'm going to use the approval flow. And I just have to go to approval for processing, and I'm just going to click the plus sign to add an additional approver. So I enter that person's name using last name first, and I can approve and forward to this additional approver. So you always have that ability. Just remember, if you don't see approve and forward, just go under details and then you're going to click on approval flow. Now, another question that frequently comes up is, how can I tell if expense reports have been paid? If I go under view and I view reports that maybe I've taken action on in the past month or so, I'm not going to see a status of paid. The final status that you will see in the system is sent for payment. So sent for payment means that it has gone through final approval, and the final approver is the auditors in payment processing, and it's ready for payment. But you will not see payment in the Concur system. And the reason why is payments are done in the PRISM system. Many approvers also are PRISM General Ledger users, and that's where you're going to see the payment information. So I'm going to go back for a moment. Now, if you want to see payment information, you're going to go into the General Ledger Account Inquiry screen. You put in a from and to period for your search period, and then you put in the account that the travel would have been charged against. Then you're going to click on Show Balances. For that month, you will see period-to-date and year-to-date balances. So we know that there was activity on this travel account during the month of April. And if I click on Journal Details, I'm able to see the breakdown of the activity, and I can see that these are all payable transactions, which means they have come out of payment processing. So I'm going to click on Drill Down to get further detail. At this point, we're able to see a supplier name, which is my name. So if these are related to travel, you're going to see the traveler's name here. And the transaction number is going to be the report number. In the Concur system, that is referred to as the report key. So I can go into further detail just by clicking View Transaction, and I can see that this was paid. And under Description, I can see the nature of this payment. So it looks like this was related to a trip to the Johnstown campus for Concur training. And the amount paid. I can get into further detail by clicking on View Payments. So here I can see the actual pay date. And if I go a little further, at this point, the payment method will say check. But if I go to Payment Overview, I'll actually be able to see whether it was a check or a direct deposit. Remember that most travelers do have direct deposit for their paychecks, so travel reimbursements are going to get direct deposited to that same account. So if I click on Payment Overview, again, I'll see the amount paid, the pay date, and in this case, I can see that this was actually a direct deposit. Remember that your traveler will get email notification of direct deposits, and of course, they'll be able to go to their online banking account to see that deposit. So this is the best way to be able to determine if expense reports have been paid. If you have any need for further detail or questions, you can always contact the Panther Express customer service group. I'm going to go back into Concur. And I am going to go in now as, instead of a test user, I'm going to go in first as myself. And I'm going to user who has some additional data loaded into the system. Another question that has come up frequently from both approvers and delegates is, when should I do an expense report? Keep in mind that when you're in the expense feature, under available expenses, what you're going to see here are travel card transactions. So if the travel card transactions are showing up in the system, you can do the expense report. So one of the things that delegates want to make sure before they start an expense report, if someone has come back from, say, a conference, and maybe they charge their airfare and hotel and food and ground transportation, everything was charged to the travel card. They don't want to start that expense report until they can verify that all those charges have come through. Otherwise, they'll find themselves doing multiple expense reports. So they want to make sure that they can see the expenses here. Also keep in mind that you only see expenses for yourself or the person that you're delegated in as. So I'm in as a test user. I only see that particular user's expenses, and I cannot copy expenses from one user to another. Now, the flexibility that you do have is when expenses show up, you don't necessarily have to wait until the trip is taken in order to do a report. So where this might come into play is, let's say someone registered for a conference in May, but the conference isn't actually till October. Maybe they registered early because they get a discount, or maybe they registered early because you want the conference registration charged to the current fiscal year, even though the trip is not going to take place till the next fiscal year. So being that those charges have already shown up in the system, they've already come through, you can go ahead and do the expense report at that time. So in this example, you'd have one expense report for the conference registration, and that was done in May. And then after the actual conference, if there are additional charges for hotel, food, ground transportation, those type of charges can be done after the trip took place. People have asked the question also, how long do I need to keep my receipts, and how long do I need to keep the credit card statements? And the auditors are advising that you keep receipts and credit card statements until the charges are reconciled to your level reports. Remember, when charges first come through from travel cards, when you first see these in the system, these are sitting like on a default university account. It's like a central holding account. They don't get charged to your departmental account until an expense report is completed and approved in the system. So once the expense report is completed and those charges are reconciled to your monthly level reports, at that point you can go ahead and dispose of the receipts, the paper receipts, and also the credit card, the travel card statements. If you want to keep them longer, maybe your grant stipulates that you hold on to that documentation longer, that is absolutely fine, and just follow the guidelines within your department or the guidelines for that grant. If you have the need to set up other approvers, how do you do that? There's a couple ways that you can do that. If, say, an approver leaves your department, they may leave the university or just transfer to another department, and you have the need to set up a brand new user as an approver, you want to make sure that you contact the Panther Express customer service group, and they will get that issue funneled to the correct people to get those new approvers set up for you. There's also a feature under profiles where you can set up what is called a previewer. So if I go under profiles and profile settings, and if I go under request delegates, one of the options is to set someone up as a previewer. People have asked if they can set up approvers for particular grant accounts or for particular purpose numbers. And the system, in the system, you can only set up approvers for entities and departments. So approvers cannot be designated below the department level. But one of the features that might be of help for you is to set someone up as a previewer. So the first thing you're going to do is just use the add feature and find that person so that you can add them. And then you give them the appropriate responsibilities. And for previewer, you're going to choose preview and receive approval emails. So if this person is your previewer, anytime an expense report would go into your queue, before it goes into your queue, it's going to go to the previewer. They would have the ability to review the expense report, They cannot modify it and they cannot approve it, but they have the ability to forward it on to you, or they can send it back to the preparer. So maybe this previewer is checking account numbers, and if they don't like them, they can return it to the preparer. Maybe they're checking for validity of expenses that are being claimed, making sure receipts are attached, any of those functions. So this is one way that you can get around that limitation of only being able to set up approvers to the department level. So take advantage of this feature if you think it can help you in your department. And I'm just going to go back to the Concur homepage. Keep in mind that you can get to the travel and expense management website from clicking on this link under company notes. Another frequent question of both delegates and approvers is when they're entering expense reports, why do they not see subcodes? And subcodes are hard-coded to the different expense types. And this system does not display subcodes. So you'll see entity, department, purpose, project, but you will not see subcodes. But there is a listing of them on the Travel and Expense Management site. So if I go to Expense Management and I go to FAQ, the very first FAQ under Expense Reports, if I click on the link and click to open this up, I'll see an Excel spreadsheet of the expense subcodes for both domestic and international travel and the expense type that they're affiliated with. So for every expense type in the system, I will see the hard-coded subcode. So you might want to print this out for yourself, or you can always come out to the site to review it. Keep in mind that P-cards on June 1st, 2017, the MCC codes to book travel on P-cards will be shut off. So at that point, you want to just make sure that you're using the travel card and not the P-card for the booking of travel. If you have any questions, you can always contact customer service either by calling them or submitting online requests. Also, you will find the contact information for Anthony Travel. So I hope this follow-up webinar has been helpful, and thank you for watching.